Our last section, perpendicular lines. So we only got about 35 minutes, but it's review, so it should be pretty quick. So what did I always keep telling you guys? What do perpendicular lines look like? Cross how? Olivia? Like a plus sign, yeah, or like a capital T. Okay? It doesn't have to be a plus sign that's like the way you'd see it on a calculator. It can be turned, but they have to make a plus sign, and usually you see that symbol right there. Okay? I showed you guys an example on the calculator, and it looked like that. Okay? Now, you can shift, like let's say I take that red line, and let's move it a little bit. Okay? I'm not going to change the slope. I'm just going to change the y-intercept. Now, by changing the y-intercept, look at the blue line, and look at the red line now. Okay, the red line's in a different spot. Are they still perpendicular? Yes. All I did was take the red line and slide it like that. That's fine. You can slide it any way you want. You just can't change the steepness of it, right, for it to be perpendicular. So, perpendicular lines intersect to form what we call right angles. Okay? On your guided notes, I'll tell you when we get to the 1 and the 2. Okay, that's the first thing. Okay? So perpendicular lines intersect to form right angles, and there's a special connection between their slopes. And this is what you want to put on your guided notes. Okay, so in the warm-up, what's one thing that we practice doing with numbers? Like the last thing we did. We took a number and we found its opposite. And what's the other thing we did? Reciprocal. Now, I put them as 1 and 2. It doesn't really matter which order you do them in. Okay? Basically, you have to make it the opposite and you have to flip it. Do either one first. It doesn't matter. Okay. So, let's make up an example. Somebody give me a fraction. Any fraction.
3 over 4.
3 over 4. 3 over 4. And what would be and this is what you guys put in the blank, opposite reciprocals. What would be the opposite reciprocal of 3 over 4?
4.
That's the reciprocal.
Negative 4.
And then make it the opposite. Right? So when we write equations of lines today, it's going to be just like yesterday, except you're not going to use the same slope. You're going to use the opposite reciprocal to make them cross, okay? To make them perpendicular. Yep.
How would you know to make?
Well, it'll say it in the directions. So it'll say something like, write an equation of a line that is perpendicular.
So what would be make perpendicular out of that?
The slope, just the slope.
Okay.
The number, the 1/2. Yep, we'll do that one. Okay, so make sure you read the directions on the test and see, does it say parallel or does it say perpendicular? Okay, it changes how you do it. Let's go here. All right, so when we're asked to write the equation of a line, I'm telling you guys on the test, I'm going to ask for both point slope and slope intercept. Okay? So you guys are going to have, you've got a box. Okay? In that box, we're going to write down a formula. What's the name of the formula that we use? We always do this one first, and then if we need to, we do change it at the end to the other one. Yep, point slope. Okay, so same format we used earlier. So I'm not even going to ask you guys the whole thing, because we've done it a lot. It's in the box, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So always start with this, and then if you need to, change it at the end. On the test, you will need to.
That's point slope.
That's point slope. Yep. Remember, slope, I'll just put it off to the side. Slope intercept is this. You need both of those for the test tomorrow. Point slope and slope intercept. We'll practice this one later on. Okay, so let's just review, just like we did yesterday. What happens to the y in that box?
It's the same.
It stays the same. Okay, so y stays as y, stays the same. If you just want to write it stays the same, you don't have to write not plugging in anything for this, unless you don't know what stays the same. Okay, but y stays the same. The minus, that just stays the same. How about the y1? It doesn't stay the same. We have to plug in a number for it that they give us. Think of a coordinate. Is the y before the comma or after the comma in a coordinate? Yeah, it's after. So for y1, plug in the number after the comma from the coordinate they give you. Right, so far, it's all the same as yesterday. Now, this is the part that'll be different. Jaden, when we had parallel lines, the slopes were what?
The slopes were the same.
Slopes were the same. Okay, so if this was yesterday, right here, I would say use the same slope. But today it's perpendicular. When you have two lines that are perpendicular, the slopes are blank, blank. What are they?
Opposite.
Opposite reciprocals, yes. Right, so you don't have a 1 and a 2. You could just write that all on the line for M. That should be your third, I think your third line down. So first, make it opposite. And I wrote down again what opposite means if you're not sure. If it's positive, you make it negative. If it's negative, you make it positive. And then second is reciprocal. Now, I already answered this, but does it technically matter which one you do first? No. You have to make it the opposite and then flip it. Or you can flip it and then make it the opposite. It'll come out the same. Okay. How about x? That's right after the parenthesis in our box. X stays the same. So x stays the same. Or you could write stays as x. The next thing in the box is the minus. That's going to stay the same for now. And how about x1? Stays the same, or does it change? Yep, it's going to change. This time you're going to go back to the coordinate, and you're going to look at the number before the comma. Okay, we already used the number after the comma. Now use the one before it. Now, if they ask you to, and I will ask you this on the test, to change from point slope to slope intercept, there's 2 steps. I didn't really leave you guys space for this because you wrote it on your notes yesterday. You could squeeze it somewhere if you want to write it again. But what are the 2 steps to change from point slope to slope intercept?
When you times the, I don't get on my.
It is something to do with times.
Distribute.
Yep. First thing you want to do is distribute, and that's on the right. So you distribute what's on the right. And then what's the second thing you have to do? It actually could be 2. It could be either this operation or this operation. It could be addition or subtraction. It depends on the problem. And that's what gets y by itself.
Wait, did we write that?
We wrote it down yesterday, but if you want to write it again, you can. And we practiced it, and we did that in the warm-up too. Okay. But that's your 2 steps. Distribute, and then get y by itself, just like Elizabeth said. Either add or subtract. You always do the opposite. Okay, so let's look at some numbers. Okay, I'm going to change these numbers because we did these already when we did it the first time. Let's do -4/5. Let's do 6/7, 8, and we'll do the number 0. Okay, let's do all the opposites first. How about, Stephen, what's the opposite of negative 4/5?
Positive 4/5.
Yeah, just positive 4/5. Sophia, what's the opposite of 6/7?
Is 7.
Just the opposite.
Oh, sorry. Negative 6/7.
Yep, just negative 6/7. Okay. How about, let's see, Leilani, what's the opposite of 8?
Negative 8.
Negative 8. And what about the opposite of 0?
0.
0 stays the same. But we are going to want to think of 0 as a fraction, because now the next step is going to be to flip it. Okay? All the other, well, except negative 8. Negative 8 and 0 are not fractions. How can we make both of these fractions? Yeah, put it over 1, put it over 1. Okay, so if you put 0, that's fine. I'm just getting ready to flip it. That's why I put it over 1. So now, flip each one of those. And if you do that, you will have the opposite reciprocal. Right? So what do we get when we flip 4/5? Yep. 5 over 5/4. So if I were to bring my calculator up and graph something with negative 4/5 and then something with a slope of 5/4, those two lines would be what? Yeah. It wouldn't be parallel because they're not the same slope. They'd be perpendicular. Okay, they'd be perpendicular. How about the reciprocal of negative 6/7?
-7/6.
Yep, negative 7/6. Now, if you're looking at that and you're like, well, wait a minute, the negative was with the 6 before. Now the negative is with the 7. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you put the negative in a fraction. Put it in the top, put it in the bottom. Some people put it in front like this. Negative 2/3.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. You can do it like this. You can do it like this. I don't usually do it the last way. I don't usually put the negative in the bottom. I either put it in the front or in the top, but it's all the same. Okay, it's all the same. Yeah. Right. How about the opposite? How about the reciprocal of negative 8/1? Yeah.
Negative 1/8.
Yep. Negative 1/8. And now you got to be careful with this one. 0/1. What do you get when you flip 0/1?
1/0.
You get 1/0.
I didn't really predict it.
And what happens when you divide by 0?
You get 0.
I thought you couldn't make 0 a fraction. I thought you were right.
Well, you can always make something a fraction just by putting a 1 under it.
I thought you couldn't make 0.
But what happens if we try to do 1 divided by 0? We don't get 0.
1.
So let's think about it like this. 6 divided by 2 gives you what? 3. So to check that answer, take 2 times 3 and you should get 6. Do you? Is 2 times 3 6? Yeah, then we did it right. So let's look at our problem. 1 divided by 0 equals, we don't know. But what should happen is this times this should give you what's in the top. So what's this times this?
1.1.
0 times that. 0, right? Doesn't matter, like, what's 0 times 5? 0 times 2. 0 times negative 8. Doesn't matter what the question mark is. We don't know the answer, but whatever it is, 0 times that is 0. Does that give me what I have in the top? Is it ever possible to do 0 times something and get 1? No. Never. You can't do 0 times something and ever get 1. That means that's undefined. You can't divide by 0. Doesn't work. Okay. And that's the reason why you can't do it. So these first 3, 1, 2, and 3, those ones all have slopes that are on an angle. Okay? Some kind of angle. Maybe angled up or angled down. How about a slope of 0? What kind of line is that?
no slope. Like zero slope.
What does that mean? Like if you draw it, a line that has a slope of 0.
Straight line. Like going side to side.
I think I know what you mean. Can you be a little more specific?
Oh, or it's the one that goes up and down, but like it doesn't. I don't know.
17.
What kind of line has a slope of 0? Yep.
Straight, like.
Okay, all lines are straight. I got that.
And like it just goes straight up and down. It doesn't cross any lines. It's
Horizontal.
Horizontal.
Alright.
Okay, horizontal.
Yeah, Lucas.
So this one with a slope of 0, okay, this, if you had a slope of 0, it would look like this. It's perfectly horizontal. Now, think about undefined. Undefined has to be a line that would be perpendicular to that. So what line is perpendicular to a horizontal?
Vertical.
Vertical. Right? So this last one is kind of a special case. Slope of 0 is perfectly horizontal. Undefined is a slope of vertical. So that's a little bit special. That's when the plus sign is perfectly up and down and left and right. All these other ones, the plus sign is going to be turned. Okay? It's going to be on an angle. Right? Except for that last one. Except for number 4. All right. So let's try this one. So on the test, the directions will say write the equation of a line in slope, intercept, and point slope. Okay, it'll ask for both. Okay, first thing we want to do is just label what's x1, what's y1, and then we'll put our m. So let's start with x1. Anyone think they can tell me what x1 is? X1 is -3. How about y1? Yep, is 1. Now, what kind of line are they looking for here? Parallel or perpendicular? Perpendicular. Because it says perpendicular, you're not going to just use the 1/2. If it said parallel, you would. What do you have to do to the 1/2?
You have to flip it.
Flip it and?
Reciprocal.
So that's flip it. What's the other thing?
Make it opposite.
Make it opposite.
So it's negative.
Yes. So you flip it and you make it the opposite because it said perpendicular. If it said parallel, you would have just used 1/2. Other than that one step we just did right here, now everything else is the same as yesterday. So Blake, what's the first letter in my point slope formula?
Y.
Yep, y. And Maya, what comes after the y?
Minus.
Minus. Okay. Kelsey, what comes after the minus?
Oh,
1. How about Julia? What comes after the 1? Equals. Yep. Okay. What comes, Caleb? What comes right after the equals? Yeah. -2. That's my slope. How about Stephen? What comes right after the -2? Not yet. We are going to have another minus, but that's going to be over here. A few things I need before that. How about Gianna? Do you remember what comes after the -2? Yep, a parenthesis. And then one more thing before we get to the minus. Joe?
X.
Yep, x. Now we got the minus, and what comes after the minus in this problem? -3. And close parenthesis. Now, is that point slope form?
no.
Yes.
It is point slope, but is it as simplified as it could be?
No.
No, there's one thing you should simplify, and what is it?
The -1.
-1's okay.
-3.
The minus 3 is really what? That's really a +3.
Doesn't it have to be y equals mx plus b?
That's going to be the next step. Yep. So
Oh.
this is point slope.
Oh.
That's one thing I'm going to ask you for on the test for perpendicular. The next thing is y equals mx plus b. So that's where we have to distribute and then do something else.
Wait, how did we get the -2?
The -2 came from this number right here.
Did we do the opposite reciprocal?
Yep, we did the opposite reciprocal.
Oh,
Exactly.
you just left it like that.
Yep. You could, some people said, well, could we do -2/1? Yes, you could. That's fine. Okay. But if I have to do arithmetic, I think it's easier to just write it like this. Just put -2. Okay, so this is point slope. Who can tell me my next step to get it to slope intersect? Two things. We got to do one of them first, though. Yep. And what am I going to distribute? -2. Now that could be a fraction. If it's a fraction, just use your calculator if you get stuck. Right? Does distributing it do anything to the left side? What do you think? Does the y minus 1 change? No. Equals. How about Princess? What am I going to get when I distribute that -2? Yep. So -2x. One more thing. I still have to do -2 times +3. -6. Okay. Is that y equals mx plus b?
No.
No. Is it point slope?
No.
No, it's in the middle. It's neither. Right? We've got one more step to get it into point slope. How about Aileen, can you tell me my last step to get y by itself here?
+1.
Yep. +1 here and here. That's gone. Only thing on the left-hand side now is y. Blake, what's going to go on the right? What's going to go on the right?
-2x. I'm still, -5.
-5. Is that slope intercept? Yes, it is.
But it's not a plus, it's a minus.
That's okay. It can be a plus or a minus.
Oh, okay.
So, I told you guys the first two questions on the test are going to be about parallel. 1 point slope, 1 slope intercept. The next two questions on the test are going to be about perpendicular. 1 point slope, 1 slope intercept. Right. Any questions on that? No? Yep, just sign up for me. Right. Any other questions on example 2? All right, so example 3, we did that one. I'm going to change the numbers and have you guys try try example 3 on your, I'll give you like 5 minutes on your own. Yes?
Oh, wait, what?
Did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Okay. So, this is basically the same thing as perpendicular, right?
Parallel and perpendicular are almost the same thing.
Parallel, yeah. But
Yep.
it's the same, like, math equation.
It's the same math steps, yep.
Okay.
You're just changing the number that you use right here. Okay?
Oh, wait. How am I going to do it?
For parallel, you use the same number. For perpendicular, it's opposite reciprocal.
Okay.
Yep. All right, I'm going to change this one a little bit. So on yours, it's still example 3, but let's change the coordinate to 4, -8, and let's change this to y equals -2x plus 3. Okay, so I want you guys to try to write an equation that is perpendicular and goes through the point 4, -8. Right, so try that part on your own. Plug it into point slope. See if you can simplify it. And then the last step, see if you can get y equals mx plus b. Okay, so I'll give you guys maybe like 3-4 minutes to do that. I'll walk around if there's any questions. And then after that, we'll we'll finish up. Yep.
Oh, do we do the opposite reciprocal on negative 2x?
Opposite reciprocal is when they ask for what kind of line? Parallel or perpendicular?
Oh yeah.
Perpendicular. I think perpendicular.
Perpendicular. Are they asking for perpendicular in this problem?
No. Oh yes.
Yes, they are.
So
So
I do.
then you do. If it said parallel, then you wouldn't. Yep. Yep. So, first thing we want to do is just write down your three things. X1, Y1, M. Once you have that, then you know what to plug in. Let's start with X1. Who can tell me what X1 is? 4. 4. X1 is the number before the comma in the coordinate. How about Y1? Yep. -8. Now, whenever one of the X1 or Y1s is a negative, you're going to have minus a minus, which means you're going to change it to a plus later on. Okay? Now, M. First of all, read the problem. Do they want parallel or perpendicular? Perpendicular, which means you don't just copy that number down and keep it the same. What do you have to do with the -2? Two things.
Opposite reciprocal.
Opposite reciprocal. What's the opposite reciprocal of -2?
1/2.
1/2. Now, you might think, oh geez, now I got a fraction, that's going to be hard. I made this problem so you're not going to have a fraction that's hard to work with. Okay? So now let's write our equation. First thing we always write. Y. What's the next thing?
Minus.
Minus. Next thing.
-8.
-8. We'll come back to that. After that,
Where did you get these numbers?
equals.
1/2.
What comes right after the equals?
1/2.
Your M. Yep.
Whoa, where's the 1/2?
What comes after the 1/2 is the opposite reciprocal.
Wouldn't it just be +2?
But then you have to flip it.
Oh.
Opposite, flip.
Okay.
You got to do both. Opposite, flip. What comes after the 1/2? Parenthesis. Yep. Next thing. Next thing. Minus. And now the last thing, we got to look up our number. 4. And close the parenthesis. That is the answer in point slope form, but we just have to simplify one thing. What's y minus -8? Yep. We're going to make it a plus. If you forget to make minus a plus, you'd probably lose like 1 point. But it's easy to do, so just make minus a plus. Okay. All right, last thing, to get y by itself, what do I have to do on the right?
-8. Oh wait, no, just
That'll be our next step.
Distribute.
Distribute what?
1/2.
What's 1/2 times x? 1/2 times x?
1/2.
1/2 x. Yeah. And what's 1/2 times -4?
2. What?
Careful. Positive 1/2 times
Oh.
-4. -2. Now, my last step to get y by itself is what? What do I want to get rid of? What do I have to do to get rid of it?
Subtract 8.
Subtract 8. Subtract 8. Subtract 8. What's on the left now? Just the left. Just y. What's on the right?
1/2 x.
Yep, that stayed the same. Minus -10. Yep. So 1/2 x minus 10. What's the name of the first one? Point slope. What's the name of the second one? Slope intercept. Point slope, slope intercept. Okay, so homework tonight. It's going to be a worksheet very similar to the worksheet you did the first time. I just changed some of the numbers.